Ken Dilanian is outside the federal courthouse where Donald Trump's lawyer had to testify today here in Washington. Vaughn Hillyard is near Donald Trump's Florida compound in Palm Beach County, and Vitali is on Capitol Hill. Ken, I'd like to start with you at the federal courthouse, because in many, they're trying to figure out what motivates Donald Trump's public lashing out is never an easy thing to do. But he's been losing a lot of hearings in this in his special counsel case, and it seemed like perhaps knowing what's happening here got him to attack the Manhattan DA. So tell us what happened there today.
Yeah, that's a reasonable hypothesis, Chuck, because no client under investigation would be comfortable with their own lawyer coming into a grand jury and having to testify about lawyer-client conversations, some of the most intimate private conversations there are, conversations you believe are protected, and normally they are. But in this case, a judge ruled that the crime fraud exception applies here because the Justice Department was able to show that Donald Trump, there's evidence that Donald Trump used his lawyers to commit a crime. And so Evan Corcoran, one of his lawyers, was brought in today and testified before the grand jury investigating the Mar-a-Lago documents case. And the big picture implications of this is that what it shows is that this case is really as much about obstruction of justice as it is about mishandling classified documents, because the question Jack Smith, the special counsel, is trying to answer is why was the Justice Department lied to? Why did Trump's lawyers assign a document? Evan Corcoran prepared it, Christina Bobb signed it, saying that they had looked and they found no more classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. Then 3 months later, the FBI comes and finds more than 100. So that's a really momentous development in this Mar-a-Lago case, and it shows that it's very different from the other examples of classified documents in Joe Biden's house or Mike Pence's house.
So, Ken, and we're going to probably confuse people here a little bit, there are two different federal investigations that Jack Smith is doing. One is what we were just talking about, the classified documents, and that's what Evan Corcoran had to testify to. But there was another ruling today having to do with whether Donald Trump's closest aides, including the former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, would be forced to testify before the grand jury investigating January 6th. And I understand, Ken, we have some developments there.
Yes, this was a secret ruling. It actually came down last week. It's the same judge, interestingly enough. Different grand jury, as you said, different investigation. This is the investigation examining January 6th and looking in part at whether Donald Trump has culpability there. And Jack Smith, same special counsel, wants to talk to a number of top aides, including Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. And Donald Trump had said, no, I'm asserting executive privilege. Well, the judge just ruled that executive privilege does not apply. Those aides have to testify. And we're talking about top national security aides like Robert O'Brien, former DNI John Ratcliffe, top political aides like Dan Scavino, John McEntee. So some very important players in the Trump administration who may or may not have information about Trump's role in January 6th are going to have to go and talk to the special counsel in front of the grand jury because Trump is expected to appeal this ruling, but it's been settled law since Watergate that a criminal investigation overcomes executive privilege. That's why the Supreme Court made Richard Nixon give up the tapes, if you'll remember, because in this case, the government's interest in having this evidence overcomes the president's interest in having executive privilege. And this is the former president, not even the current president, so his hand is even weaker. So another big development and a separate investigation of Donald Trump, Chuck.
You need an entire program to keep up with this and to keep up with the different players, and that's just with the Washington investigations. Ken Dilanian in Washington, thank you. Vaughn Hillyard is in Palm Beach County, outside the Donald Trump Mar-a-Lago compound here. And Vaughn Hillyard, is there any crow that they're willingly eating about lying to the public about what was going to happen this week?
No, and Donald Trump is continuing to deliver the messages as he so chooses to do so himself. he is his own spokesperson and perhaps the most accurate one. Donald Trump has continued over the course of the last days to post a flurry of social media posts, including ones that were specifically more direct than any we had seen earlier even this week, when he tweeted protest, protest, protest after suggesting that he was going to be arrested on Tuesday. And there were dozens of folks that came here outside of Mar-a-Lago to stand by him in solidarity. Just this morning alone, he posted on his social media account that there could be potential death and destruction if he were to be charged. He suggested that this is anarchy and the work of the devil. He has suggested that if charges were brought against him, it would make this worse than Russia or China. He equated it, Chuck, to the Gestapo. This is an individual who, on his social media accounts, has gone so far as to attack Alvin Bragg personally. And I just want to, take the folks back to a couple days ago when in one particular post he said, quote, Alvin Bragg should be held accountable for the crime of, quote, interference in a presidential election. Again, held accountable. Donald Trump is going to Waco, Texas tomorrow to hold what is his first formal mega rally of his 2024 presidential campaign. And ultimately, it will be up to a jury, if he were to be indicted, to determine his guilt. But it will be up to American voters to determine whether he ascends to the GOP nomination and potentially the White House again, Chuck.
And do we have any idea, does he have a theme for his Waco event, or is this just like an old-fashioned rally where, all the greatest hits get played and perhaps he debuts a new attack on either a member of the press, a presidential candidate, or somebody else?
Right. So far, the campaign has tried to orchestrate events that they said were a little bit more tailored. Like when he went to Iowa, the intention was to have it focus on education, which he only gave about maybe 5% of it toward education policy. Yeah. But this is the old-fashioned Donald Trump that we have come to know over the last 7 years. And for Donald Trump, it's clear where his two focuses have been over the course of the last week, and that was on the multiple investigations into him, undercutting investigators' reputations. And then, of course, the second focus for him has been Ron DeSantis and trying to undercut his potential Republican rival. Chuck.
Hey, did the campaign explain why they picked Waco?
There has been no explanation to us at this point, though their spokesman did tell another news outlet that it was in the middle of the state, convenient from all the major markets. Of course, it should not be lost on anybody that this is in the middle of the 30th anniversary since the standoff against the federal agents that resulted in dozens of deaths 30 years ago. And so Donald Trump, of course, is not usually one who is ignorant to messaging or perhaps coincidence. And this comes at a time in which Donald Trump himself is, of course, potentially going to be trying to be in the middle of his own standoff against federal agents as well.
I hear you. The only thing I don't know why he would want to be compared to a cult leader, but I'll maybe just leave that up in the ether. Vaughn Hillyard reporting outside of Mar-a-Lago. Vaughn Hillyard, thanks very much. Let me move over to Ali Vitali in Capitol Hill. Ali, I'm curious what kind of conversations you've had with Republicans who haven't been quoted supporting Donald Trump, and whether any of them have gotten nervous about getting out over their skis and what they did to Alvin Bragg this week.
Look, I've even heard from ones who are publicly supporting him and privately say that they're just kind of utterly exhausted by this, because it has felt like Trump has commanded news cycles before this, but this week really felt like everything old was new again from 2016, 17, 18, and into the years that Trump was in the White House here in Washington. Every conversation that I had with Republican lawmakers, every press conference, whether it was about this explicitly or not, all of it came back to Trump. I think what was fascinating for me is Speaker McCarthy in Orlando at the beginning of the week got very feisty with reporters for asking about Trump and the leverage that he has over this party, despite the fact that he deputized and endorsed 3 of his top committee chairmen to go after Alvin Bragg and ask him to come before them and testify. Of course, that doesn't seem likely. We're waiting to see if they actually escalate that to some kind of subpoena that becomes then harder to ignore. But look, for McCarthy, he is now realizing that defending Donald Trump comes with a price, especially when you have the majority. You can't just defend him and then not face questions about it and have all of us focus on the topics that you want us to talk about, like energy and this so-called Parents' Bill of Rights. That's very much at play here. But I also think of something that Chairman Mike McCall said to me earlier in the week, too, where he said, look, we are exhausted. And frankly, he said that on the record, but even some of the people who have been publicly defending Trump have said that to me privately. They are once again exhausted of the Trump of it all, and we're only just getting started.
So, yet committee chairs sent letters. So if they're so exhausted, I mean, the problem is they say that can be said behind the scenes, but the actions of the party in power in the House make it seem as if everybody is rallying around the former president.
Yeah, but this is also what it was during the Trump years too, Chuck. How many conversations did you and I have with Republican lawmakers who publicly would stand next to him when he was nominating judges or signing tax cuts, and then privately come back and grumble about how much they disliked working with him and how much they wanted to see him stop doing a lot of the things that he was doing on Twitter and every other platform? This is, again, the same situation. I will say it's immediately entertaining to see people like Chairman Jim Jordan say that he can't see or hasn't seen the latest Trump tweets about death and punishment that you and Vaughn were talking about. And then when one of our reporters said, oh, here, look, I'll show it to you on my phone, he said, oh, I can't read without my glasses. We are very squarely back in the place where we were in during the Trump era of having them respond to tweets that they clearly do not want to respond to, and going around and around in circles here as they say, not necessarily that he's the leader of their party, but look, he's one of 3 candidates for Republicans who are running for president right now. He's certainly in the mix in a very heavily favored way.
And also today, Marjorie Taylor Greene led some members of Congress to the D.C. jail to visit with January 6 insurrectionists, people that attacked the United States Capitol, I guess to provide aid and comfort. What was that about?
Yeah, that's about, again, highlighting the ways that Republicans are trying to whitewash what happened on January 6th. I think what's interesting about that is that Democrats, despite the fact that they don't support going to the jail for the reasons that Republicans are going, they went so that they said that they could hold them accountable to the real story of January 6th and why these folks who are in the D.C. jail are in the D.C. jail in the first place. And it also comes after Ashley Babbitt's mother met with Speaker Kevin McCarthy yesterday. McCarthy had previously said that he watched the footage of Ashley Babbitt's shooting here on Capitol Hill on January 6th, said he thought that the cop in that case acted correctly, but Babbitt's mom told our team yesterday that McCarthy said he would go back and revisit that, relook at whether or not he thought the cop acted in the correct fashion. So again, rewriting history here with the power of the majority.
Ali Vitali, Capitol Hill correspondent for us at the Capitol today.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.